Hello there, everybody. Welcome to this very special podcast interview. My name is Owen Fitzpatrick, and this is the Changing Minds podcast. Today, I am really delighted to be introducing to you a very dear friend of mine. Mike Goldman is an award-winning leadership team coach and the #1 Amazon best-selling author of 2 books, Breakthrough Leadership Team and Performance Breakthrough. He speaks internationally to groups of business leaders such as the Young Presidents Organization and the Entrepreneurs Organization, or also known as EO. During his 30 plus year coaching and consulting career, he's worked with clients such as Disney, Verizon, Chanel, and Polo Ralph Lauren. His insights have been featured in Forbes, Fast Company, and Chief Executive Magazine, and he's widely regarded by CEOs as the expert on building great leadership teams. Mike is someone I've gotten the chance to know over the last year or so. He is also a member of the National Speakers Association, along with myself. We both are on the board for the New York City chapter of the National Speakers Association. And one of the things that really impressed me over the course of chatting with Mike is just how down to earth he is and how much experience he has. We had so many things in common that I just felt that there's so many listeners that I know of the podcast that would be very delighted to listen to us talk. So really, really excited to have you on, mate. Thank you very much for taking the time out to chat with me and letting our listeners listen in.
Thank you for having me, Mr. CSP.
There you go. If you don't know what that means, it's basically stands for Certified Speaking Professional. I was just awarded that this week, so it just means I'm now better than all of you in the world, because now I've letters after my name, and we all know what that means. No, it's a nice little designation just as a speaker that I got. So
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very much, my friend. Much appreciated. So anyway, enough about me. I want to start by asking you about you. Would love if you could start off, because I do want to get into sort of how you got to where you got to. But first of all, where have you got to? In other words, what is it that you do, Mike? How would you describe what you do, and what kind of people do you typically help?
Yeah, I help CEOs, business owners, entrepreneurs create great leadership teams so they can create great companies. So I call myself a leadership team coach. When people hear coach, they typically think of one-on-one coaching. And the work that I do with an entire leadership team, which is typically the CEO and the CEO's direct reports. And the focus of it is mostly small and mid-market companies that I work with. And the focus is really working with that team to create a better team, help them with strategy, help them with culture, help them make sure they're executing with discipline so that great team can create a great company.
Love it. And I've got lots of obviously follow-on questions to that. But before I get to them, what got you to this place? What got you to the place where you're doing this kind of work?
Yeah, well, I've been coaching and consulting for about 35 years now. And I started off first half of my career right out of undergrad, right out of college, is I went to work for what's I think still the biggest management consulting firm out there. It's called Accenture. Back when I was there, they were part of Arthur Andersen. But I spent about the first 17 years of my career doing consulting for big consulting companies, only working with Fortune 500s. It was great work. I'll say it was good work. And I was successful at it, but it wasn't a great life. At the time, I was traveling 4 or 5 days a week. I was living in New Jersey and working with Levi's in San Francisco and Disney's retail operation outside of LA for about 3.5 years, coming home on the weekend. And that's no way to raise a family. I had wife at home, 2 small kids at home. So got out of that, decided to start my own business. I actually bought an office from a franchise, a staffing and recruiting franchise, which was a horrendous business for me. Dug myself a pretty deep 6-year financial hole from my 3 years trying to make money in staffing and recruiting. And then from there thought, hey, I'm better than these other staffing and recruiting folks. I was a consultant for 17 years. So I started doing these workshops on employee productivity and employee retention, thinking it was going to build my staffing business. People love the workshops. I was all excited. People were waiting online to talk to me after these workshops, but it did nothing to build my speaking business. So I finally got smart after 3 years and said, maybe there's something in this workshop thing. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether I'm a trainer, consultant, coach, advisor, but I'm going to start doing this full time. And that was about 15 years ago. And, since then I've grown. Coaching business took me a little while to get it off the ground, but rough 3 years in staffing, but I'd never be here today if it wasn't for those rough 3 years.
Love it. And I suppose along the way, along the journey, one of the things that obviously happens is that you get a number of enlightening moments. And that's one of the things I'm always interested in, is that these pivotal moments where you have that shift. Now, it seems like one of those shifts was you're working in consulting and you're spending a lot of time away from your family and your kids. And it's tough. And you get to the point, enough is enough. It's like a threshold. And then again, another light bulb seems to went off whenever you were doing the sort of the workshopy type things. What's another example of, for you, the most powerful light bulb moment, something that really changed something massively in your life or in your approach or the way you think?
Yeah, I think I love the question. When I was just starting to do those workshops and just starting to get excited about what they could become, and I still had my staffing business, I remember I had a 2-day workshop that I was doing for the administrative staff of an accounting firm that was having a lot of challenge. It was like high school. They were fighting with each other. And I was in there. I was doing some cool Lencioni 5 dysfunctions of a team stuff in there with them. And I woke up in the morning and my head was killing me. My nose was stuffed. I had bronchitis and a sinus infection, felt horrible. But I said, you know what? I promised I was going to do this. Frankly, I needed the money back then. So I said, I'm going to go and do the best I can. So I took some Dayquil and I brought my box of tissues and I went, and I didn't know how I was going to get through it, but I start this workshop and I felt amazing. Didn't need to use any tissues. It just felt like I was all better. And I did a full day that went unbelievably well. And then that first day is over and I start feeling it again. I thought, I think I'm going to need an ambulance to get home. Like all of a sudden it came back to me how horrible I felt. Got home, said, I'm not sure I'm going to make it for the second day, but I got to do it. Love doing it. And again, I need this money. So I go in the second day, and while I'm doing it again, I feel great. It's only when I stop that the sickness comes on again. And I thought, if I can find something in my life that makes me feel that good, even when I'm sick as a dog, I've got to find a way to do that all the time. So that was just such a kick in the head to me to say, this is what you need to be doing.
Great. Love it. And so what is it that you would say that you do? Like you mentioned Patrick Lencioni and the 5 dysfunctions of team. Like, so I'd love you to share with us from your own point of view. And obviously many people out there are very familiar with Lencioni's work. What is it that you think you took from that, you drew from that? And what is it that you do, I suppose, differently to, let's say, Lencioni leadership sort of approach, or the Lencioni leadership approach, or other leadership approach? What makes you different as a leadership coach?
Yeah, and I've had a number of certifications in different coaching organizations over the last bunch of years, scaling up, and something called Gravitas and Metronome United and NLP training, which I know, obviously, Owen, you've done a ton of and written books about. But I've had all of this, and really, I have, after a while, you take all that and you go from all that stuff being really prescriptive, here's how you do it, to it kind of morphs into your own model. So the model that I've created, which is based on all those things, and Lencioni stuff from 5 dysfunctions of a team is part of it. The part I take from Lencioni is the importance of that vulnerability-based trust. That if you've read the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and if you haven't, go read that book, everybody. But that first dysfunction is lack of trust. And that trust is not about task-based trust. It's not, oh, and I'm going to trust if you say you're going to get it done, you're going to get it done. The vulnerability-based trust says, I trust that I can be open and honest with you, and you're going to do what's right for me, do what's right for the organization, that we're in a safe place for me to say anything, to receive feedback from you, to give feedback from you. And that vulnerability-based trust, when I work with leadership teams, it's got to start with that trust. And initially they don't have it, right? Initially it's the CEO and a bunch of leaders that are not really a team. It's a bunch of people reporting to the CEO who have their own teams, but they don't really feel like a team, which is strange. You know, I remember years ago, I worked with a $50 million company. You'd think they have a leadership team. They didn't have a leadership team. They had a CEO who told a bunch of people what to do, and they went and did it. So that vulnerability-based trust from Lencioni is important. But what I've kind of pulled together from Lencioni and Jim Collins and, Marcus Buckingham and all my different coaching certifications is really this idea of building what I call a breakthrough leadership team. And the model is one of, first I'll define it. A breakthrough leadership team is a team of A players that creates an organization with both top and bottom line growth, so revenue and profit. They've got to be growing consistently. They're creating a fulfilling environment for their employees, so they're not profitable on the backs of their employees. In fact, I don't even like to call them employees. It's team members, and they feel incredibly filled to come to work every day, and they're adding some real value to society. And what I've created is a model to create that breakthrough leadership team. And it's got 6 pillars, which if you want, we can go through, but it's got 6 pillars. And the point of it is most organizations, I would say, focus on the symptoms. By focus on the symptoms, I mean, we've got a revenue problem. We must have a bad sales process. We've got an employee retention problem. Maybe we ought to put in place an employee of the month program, that'll fix that. It's like you're dealing with the branches on the tree rather than the roots of the tree to make it grow solid. And to me, if you've got a problem with revenue, you've got a problem with employee engagement, first place you've got to look is the leadership team. If there's a problem between sales and service and they're not getting along, I got to look on the leadership team and say, do we not have that trust on the leadership team that we need? Because if you create a great leadership team, that cascades down through to the rest of the organization. So an example, I worked with a client a number of years ago that we came into the boardroom. I do quarterly planning with all my clients, came into the boardroom, and they were complaining that morale was down. People were complaining. It was all like, how much do we need to do for these people? No one's ever happy. No matter what we do, they're not happy. So I said, all right, before we work on that, because they wanted to talk about it, I said, I'm going to do a secret ballot. And I asked them a question. I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend to someone to come work here? It's a way of saying, how much do you enjoy working for the company? And on a scale of 1 to 10, the average on the leadership team was a 4 out of 10. So I said, we're not solving the problem out there until we solve the problem here. If there's a morale problem, if there's a culture problem on the team, it starts with the leadership team. You don't fix company culture, you fix leadership team culture and watch it cascade down to the rest of the organization.
So I would love you to go through, if you wouldn't mind, Mike, what are some of those important elements that you walk leadership teams through?
Yeah, so there's 6 pillars that I work with my leadership teams on to create great leadership teams. And the first one is mastering self-leadership, right? People always, oh, I'm good at that. Let's move on to the other stuff. I'm really good at that. But you and I both know that's not the case. And you can't build a great team. You can't be a great leader unless you're a great leader of yourself first. So number 1, it's about mastering self-leadership. Number 2, it's about finding the right people for the team. So how do you go out and understand your team and what you need on the team so you can go out and find the right people, find A players for your leadership team. The next one is proactively structuring the leadership team. So what I mean by that is, a lot of organizations, CEOs come to me and go, man, I've got 50 people in my company. Morale is, really crappy right now. Do you think it's time I hired a head of HR? I'm like, well, if you're asking me that question, it's already too late. What companies need to do, what I help them do in proactively structuring their team, is understand what are all the functions in their organization right now and who's accountable. And given I do a 12-quarter leadership team plan, 12 quarters out, what's the plan for growth? And then taking a look at the structure of that team each quarter as you project out into the future and say, how does my team need to change to support that growth? So that you understand 9 months, 12 months before you need, let's say you need to hire a VP of sales. You think you're going to need a VP of sales 9 months from now. Find it out now. Don't find it out when sales start to fall through the cracks. So proactively structuring the team is looking at that future growth. So you can either start looking on the outside or start grooming somebody from the inside, right? So it's mastering self-leadership, number one, finding the right people for the team, proactively structuring the team, creating a resilient culture on the team is the fourth one. And that I talk about the 3 V's of culture. It's about values that you live every day. It's about vision, having a clear vision that your team are enthusiastic about, and having that vulnerability. I talked about trust-based vulnerability before. That's stuff that comes from Lencioni. So values, vision, vulnerability. So that's the fourth pillar is culture, resilient culture. The fifth is executing with discipline. And that's all about creating a rhythm of aligning around priorities. I work with my clients on quarterly priorities, which I call rocks, those 90-day priorities. So, what are your priorities that you're aligned around? Second, discipline of execution is, are you measuring the right things? And the third is, do you have the right planning and communication rhythm? Annual planning, quarterly planning, monthly check-ins, weekly accountability meetings, daily huddles. So that was the fifth, executing with discipline. And the sixth is continuous development and improvement. And a big part of that is assessing the talent on your team. One of the things I do with my clients every quarter is we do a talent assessment to figure out who are their A players, B players, C players, and what I call toxic C players. And there's a very specific model I've created based on how productive they are and whether they're adding or subtracting from the culture to figure out whether they're A, B, C, or toxic C, and figure out what are the actions you need to take on that. Who needs coaching? Who needs development? Who needs to go work for the competition because they don't belong in your company anymore. So that's the last piece, is that continuous development and improvement.
And so I just want to deep dive into a few of those, if that's okay, Mike. So with regards to let's say the continuous development, right? You said you built this sort of survey. Well, is it a survey? When we talk about a tool could mean anything. So what is it specifically? Do they sit down as a 360 thing, or how it?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's a framework I've created, which is basically it's a model that's on a piece of paper that basically I have my leaders and they do it together as a leadership team every quarter. It's not a survey they do separately. Every quarter is a leadership team. They'll look at all of their direct reports. They give each of their direct reports a score from 1 to 10 on productivity. And by the way, productivity does not mean they're working hard or they're working late. It means they're reaching their goals. So you better know what their goals are and be able to quantify them. So number one, it's a score from 1 to 10 on productivity, and it's a score on 1 to 10 on how well they're living the core values. And I define core values as an organization as non-negotiable behaviors. There's typically 3 to 6 of those non-negotiable behaviors that anchor a company's culture. So once you have their productivity score and their core value score, using this framework, this model I've created, that those scores actually help us to plot that person on the model. And that tells us whether they're an A player. A players are folks that are 9s or 10s in productivity and core values. Tells us whether they're B players, which means they're a little lower in core values and productivity. C players, which mean they might be living the values, but their productivity is way too low. Or toxic C players, which says, I don't care how productive they are, they're not living the core values and they're toxic to the organization. So it's a very specific model. And the reason why I don't do it as a survey, the reason I do it together as a team, it's because it allows the leaders on the leadership team to challenge each other. Hey, wait a minute. There's no way he's a 9 in core values. Every time we get together, this is a guy that's disrespectful to everyone else on the team. How could you give him a 9 in core values? Well, the team challenges each other, which means they're going to be way more honest when they come to the table.
That's really great and really well explained. So just getting into vulnerability then, because this is something, and I've talked about this recently in another podcast, because it is a very popular topic. Obviously, Brené Brown is like the main proponent, at least in pop culture and psychology, in the area of vulnerability. So she started talking about shame, researcher on shame, and emphasizes the power of being vulnerable and whatnot. And she's excellent work done. I teach that a lot as well. I teach a lot of the importance of building trust, not just like you said, the task-based trust, i.e. the reliability as I call it, but also vulnerability as well as authenticity. And obviously vulnerability and authenticity go hand in hand. From your perspective, because I know you sort of start off with that early, and you said, you start off with the Lencioni or Lenconi or however you pronounce his name. When we start off with that, you talk about, the sort of the trust-based vulnerability. First of all, why, from your point of view, is it so important? And second of all, what are things that basically leaders need to do in order to do it? Because I also have seen a lot of people like leaning in and going, oh, vulnerability. Okay, yeah, I'm going to be, and they're strategically vulnerable. So they go in and it's like the thought leaders or speakers. And we both know, the kind of people we're talking
I'm
about.
going to be very careful where I'm vulnerable.
Exactly. Or now at 2 minutes into my speech, I'm going to do the vulnerability piece, and that's going to warm my audience to me so they trust me. And then I'm going, and I mean, that defeats the purpose, because on the one hand, you want to work on that quality. On the other hand, you don't want it to be a Machiavellian structured strategy to deceive people into, getting into your trust circle so you can, you know what I'm trying to say? So from your point of view, Bo, why is it important? And what's the best way to help people, or what's the best way to become more vulnerable in order to be able to overcome that challenge?
Yeah, again, my focus with my leaders is we've got to create a great team. And that vulnerability on the team, that I'll call it creating a safe place on the team to say anything. I'll say if you don't have that, then great ideas never come to the surface. Feedback that the CEO needs, that the CFO needs, that other members of the team get, those are never surfaced because people are afraid to say those things. So when you have that vulnerability, that safe place on the team, the CEO may be pounding his or her fist on the table saying, this is what we need to do. If you don't have a safe place, nobody's going to call bullshit if it's a bad idea. And someone's got to be able to do that. No one is going to be able to give folks, feedback. No one, if I don't have a safe place and I'm feeling nervous about getting something done. I've got this fear that I've been given this accountability on the team, and man, I'm not sure I'm up to the task. Well, if there's not a safe place, I'm going to hide that from everybody else, do the best I can, and probably screw it up royally. Whereas if we have a safe place, I'm able to say, hey, Owen, I know you've asked me to do this. team, I could really use your help. I've got to be honest, I've never done that before. I want to do the best I can, but I could really use your help in getting it done. And if there's no safe place, people think if I admit I'm no good at something, now they've got me and they're going to attack. So that's what, it's important. If you don't have that, you don't have a team. What I'd say about how you do that, I'll give kind of two things that I think are important. Number one, I had learned years ago how important that was. And I learned it kind of to your point, Owen, I learned it as a technique. I need to get my team to be vulnerable. How am I going to get my team to be vulnerable? I didn't think I needed to be vulnerable. I needed my team vulnerable. And I remember trying to, ask them where they needed help and they would never say anything. And I'm like, well, this vulnerability thing isn't working, until I finally got the brilliant idea that I needed to be vulnerable first. And as soon as I said, guys, I know we've got to get this thing done. I'm not sure what my next step is, and I could really use your help. I've never done it before. All of a sudden, when I initiated, not as a strategy, but I just did that because it was natural. I said, oh my God, I was honest with them and vulnerable with them, and now they're vulnerable right back. I could remember 2 years ago when the world first closed down, and I was talking to the CEOs that are clients of mine about how to handle this. And my coaching to them was, you need to be vulnerable with your team. Now, that doesn't mean get on a Zoom call, curl up in the corner in the fetal position and have them watch you cry because you don't.
So that doesn't work. Crawling up in the
No, I tried it.
Oh, okay.
I tried it. The client fired me on the spot.
All right.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna delete that from the suggestions.
Yeah, exactly.
That was
Take
my
that
number
out.
one go-to, but I'm glad that you clarified that.
Just edit that one out.
Yeah, no problem.
But so it's not about that kind of vulnerability. But I said, you're having a difficult time and you're, and you're, from a family standpoint, you're having a tough time. I said, if you want people to share that stuff with you, you've got to create that safe place and share it with them. And when they started doing that, all of a sudden, the culture, which everybody was so worried, now that we're remote, are we gonna lose our culture? That vulnerability from the CEO first actually created a stronger culture, because people felt like they could be more honest. And one of the very structured things I do with my leadership teams, I call it the peer accountability exercise, which this exercise scares the crap out of them when I first describe it. But I have my leaders as part of, I do it probably once or twice a year as part of a quarterly planning session. I have all of the leaders, the CEO and direct reports, sit around a circle, actually get out from the boardroom table, sitting around a circle, no table between them. And each of them gives each other feedback on what's one thing. So Owen, if I'm giving you feedback, I'd say, Owen, here's one thing you do that really helps the team, and I just want to thank you for it. Then I'm also going to say, here's one thing you do that hurts the team, and I really wish you'd work on it.
I don't even know why you're criticizing me right now. Like what's with that, Mike?
It's about, your audience knows it. I know it. We need to bring it to the surface. But just doing that, and people think the main goal of that exercise, and it is an important goal, people think the main goal is, wow, I just got a lot of great feedback.
Yeah.
And I'm going to work on. And of course, that's a big goal. But the bigger goal is, by them getting over that fear of actually saying to their CEO, hey, Joe, when you constantly interrupt me in meetings, it really makes me not want to even bring any new ideas. And I really wish you would stop doing that. Like, when you give that CEO and the rest of the team honest feedback, and by the way, the only response to getting that feedback I allow is thank you. Not even, oh yeah, that's a good one. Just thank you.
I can just imagine everyone walking out afterwards and turning to each other going, like
No, but I'll tell you that it scares them, and they are so energized when that's done, because not only have they gotten that good feedback and they realize that we've created a safe place where they can give and receive that kind of feedback. But the real benefit that they don't even realize is what we're doing is I'm helping them build muscles so they could give that feedback all the time. So they don't have a fear of right after a meeting pulling somebody aside and saying, hey, remember that exercise we did with Coach Mike 2 weeks ago? And you said you weren't going to do that anymore. You kind of just did it again. Like, people start getting really confident and feel safe about giving each other feedback all the time. And then that cascades down from the leadership team to the rest of the team. And it's just a phenomenal exercise.
Love it. No, that's terrific, Mike. One other thing I wanted to ask about the 6 elements, right? And then there's one or two other questions before we go into the quick fire round. But the personal leadership element, obviously, that's something I do a lot of work on personal leadership or self leadership as well. But I'd love to hear from your perspective, what are the most important things that you cover or discuss or work on with folk when you're helping them?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. I'll hone in on maybe 2 of them, but I do a lot of work on, strength finder stuff and leveraging people's strengths and personal goal setting and all that kind of stuff. But the ones that may be a little different than what most people hear, I call them fire and focus. And fire is about, it's interesting, just had a conversation with a buddy of mine yesterday who's a coach that lost his fire. Fire is about having that fire in your belly to go out and slay the next dragon. And I was having a conversation with, again, a buddy of mine yesterday who just hit about a year ago, actually, not just, about a year ago, hit this unbelievable level in his coaching business, which was his big, hairy, audacious goal for years. And he hit that. And now he's not inspired. He's still got a good business, but he feels like he's going through the motions and he's really worried about it. And what happened, and there are a lot of different ways this happened for him, it was about reaching some great goal. The fire went out because we have this durability bias, right? That we think when we reach some goal, it's going to make us happy forevermore. What it does is we get really happy for about 10 minutes and then we move on with our lives. He never thought, what's next? So my question for him was, what's that next dragon you're going to slay? What's that scary thing you're going to go do? For me, it was moving from coaching, where I had a very successful coaching business, to saying, I'm going to write another book and become, and get on stage and really build my professional speaking part of my career. That was scary. But it lit that, it kept that fire burning in me to go do that next scary thing. So one of the things I help my clients do is make sure that they've got that next dragon as an organization, as well as an individual, to keep that fire burning. And then the other one, and this is, the book isn't written yet, but it's in my head. It's going to be book number 3 for me, is all about focus. And I know, Owen, you know this very well, but people believe mistakenly that things happen to them and that triggers a feeling. And what they don't get is that's not really the way it happens. Something happens and that causes you to focus in some way. And that focus drives a feeling. So the same thing could happen to me today that happened 3 weeks ago. But if 3 weeks ago I was really stressed out and it happened, it would cause me to feel one way. But if it happened to me today and I'm feeling great because I get to talk to a CSP for 45 minutes, I'm feeling great, I'm going to have a very different feeling from that. So the idea I talk to people about is this idea of focus switching. And you've got, part of this is having real self-awareness, which takes a lot of practice, but real self-awareness to say, when you have a disempowering feeling, when you're feeling stressed or angry or frustrated, an unproductive kind of feeling, typically those are unproductive. It's self-awareness enough to know, to identify that, and then say, okay, what am I focused on? So it may be that somebody in a meeting did something to kind of throw the wrench into an idea. And if my focus, and that may get me angry. And if I step back and go, why am I angry at that? Well, I'm angry because I'm focused on the fact that I believe this person had negative intent. I believe they're trying to screw something up on purpose. Now, I don't know about you, but I've met very few people in my life that wake up in the morning and say, what could I screw up today?
Well, I can think of a lot of people like our friend Rob, definitely in that category. No, we're joking, everybody.
other than Rob, I hope you're listening.
Yeah.
But by switching that focus to say, wait a minute, if I switch my focus to they're just trying to do the best they can with the resources they have, it drives a very different feeling and it drives a very different behavior. Instead of being angry, I get curious. I wonder why they did that.
And that's very much in line with, as you mentioned, it's very much in line with a lot of work that I do around storytelling. It's the stories that we choose to tell about the experiences that we have. And so these stories, again, are sort of linked in or connected through focus, right? And it's also connected to the work that I know that you're familiar with as well, the work of Lisa Feldman Barrett, that our brain is running a body budget. And as a result of that, we could be hangry, right? Hungry because, angry because we're hungry. Or tangry is another word that I use, which is, angry because we're tired, or even tanktious, where we're anxious because we're tired. And these are the kind of terms I like to use to describe the fact that you think that because you're arguing with somebody else, that the reason you're so angry is because of them. Well, actually, maybe you are angry at them, but maybe it's not so much about them. Maybe it's about what's going on in your body as well. And as a result of what's going on in your body, you're more likely to your point, Mike, focus on the very things that really piss you off. Because one of the things that we know as well is that the high arousal emotions, and this is everything from excitement to fear to frustration to anger to ecstasy. These are the emotions that are actually quite addictive. These are the emotions that the brain wants to keep going to. And in a fascinating neuroscience study, they found that when people had the chance to trigger different emotions in their brain by pressing buttons and altering different parts or stimulating the release of different things, what they would lean into is the high arousal emotions, not the positive ones. So the high arousal, whether they're positive or negative, people kept going back to them. And it kind of makes sense. It's why people go to horror movies and they go to movies that they know will make them feel strongly, because we want to feel strongly. It's not just that we want to feel positive emotions. And so the reason I bring all that up is I think so often when we have that choice of focus on it, the unconscious response is to focus on generating more intense, strong emotions. And when that's something positive, like enthusiasm or excitement or motivation or passion, great. But when it's not, again, either from your perspective, helping them to stop and to focus on something else can give them the chance to be able to take operational control over that and feel differently. Or again, with my way of looking at it, is helping them to tell a new story, to create a new appraisal of that experience, and to be able to stop telling the story of them being the victim, where things are happening to them, as you pointed out, or stop telling the story about them being the villain, where they're the cause of their own, destruction and they're the public enemy number one, and instead choose a different type of story that leads to difference. So I love that, and I think it's very much in alignment with, the neuroscience literature out there, as well as a lot of the psychology stuff as well.
And it's difficult to do. There are some books, and you've recommended books to me. We've read some of the same books. There's some books, frankly, that scare you into thinking, well, I don't have any control over my thoughts anyway. It's all in my unconscious mind or non-conscious mind. And I don't believe that's true, but I do know it's really hard, sometimes seemingly impossible, to have that self-awareness in the moment. My son does something to really piss me off, and I'm about to do something really unproductive and yell and scream and get angry. And I really should switch my focus to something more empowering. And I'm like, no, I'm just going to get angry. In the moment, it seems like we have no ability to do it because it happens in a fraction of a second that it just sets us off. And that's why it's so important to practice this. To your point, tell yourself different stories, figure out what are those things you typically focus on that make you anxious or make you angry or frustrate you? When you're not in that moment, meditate on it, visualize, affirmations. There are so many things you can do to get your mind set so that when you are in that moment, you start to create that habit of going to an empowering place versus a disempowering place.
Sure. And also noticing, as we were talking about, the reason I'm feeling this way isn't 100% as a result of what's happened to me now. It's also as a result of the fact that I just argued with somebody else earlier, or the fact that I haven't eaten in a while, or the fact that my blood sugar is low, or the fact that I'm tired, or the fact that I'm burnt out. Like there's a infinite array of other reasons. And when you start to see them as part of the issue, you're no longer as likely to keep focusing on that one thing, because one of the things I've spent a lot of time, learning about in the field of psychology, and I had a guy called Richard Nisbett, who was one of the top social psychologists of the 20th century. And I was interviewing him on a podcast, a few months ago. And one of the things he talked about one of the biggest mistakes a lot of people make when they go through social psychology research, and I've made this mistake myself, is it's very deterministic. It's pretty much looking at this means this happened, therefore this, right? And what he said is so much is contextual. So many of the reasons why we feel the way we feel is not because a person said this word or because of this event happened. It's because this event happened and how are we feeling and this and that. Another guy, Robert Sapolsky, brilliant book called Behave, takes the behavior that we engage in and looks at it from the lens of how do you look at this from the seconds before it, as in the neurochemicals that led to this actual action. Then he goes to the day before it. What events happened to you that day that might have led to that? Then he goes, a little bit further along, and it goes to your childhood, and it goes to your hormones, and it goes to your genes even. And it's just looking at a behavior from all those different lenses gets you to recognize that if I'm in a moment and I'm pissed off, it's not that I'm necessarily just pissed off with whatever's happening and I'm, like, inverted commas, just triggered by that. There's a whole host of other events happening simultaneously that are all contributing to this. And when you recognize that, you're no longer as likely, from my point of view at least, to focus on that one thing that you're like not letting go of. So, if I'm arguing with somebody, if I'm arguing with my girlfriend and I'm in that moment and I suddenly go, what am I arguing about here? The reason I'm arguing isn't just because of this topic. It's also because of all these other things that are going on. I think that can be,
I love that,
remarkably useful.
I love that, because there are times, and I think I'm not alone in this. I hope I'm not alone in this, but you'll tell me.
You probably are, mate. You probably are.
Just me. No, but there are times where all of a sudden I'll just feel down, or all of a sudden I'll feel stressed, or I'll feel some negative kind of disempowering emotion.
Is it just after you've looked in the mirror?
It was just after you had a conversation with Rob. No, but I'll feel that way. And all of a sudden it'll hit me and I'll go, nothing happened. Like what? And I'll try to start going back, like, wait a minute. So I just had lunch and I get, and every once in a while I'll go back and go, oh, it was that phone call 3 hours ago, or sometimes I'll never figure it out. But to your point, it could go back so many different ways. It's not just about what happened in the moment. I love that.
Yeah. No, that's great. I have one more question, then we'll get into the quick fire round, if that's okay, Mike. You also do work on differentiation and creating a differentiation strategy. You want to share a couple of key ideas that the kinds of things that you do when you're helping organizations differentiate?
Yeah, most organizations think that to get where they want to go, to grow 25% a year, to be bought by Google for billions of dollars or whatever, to do that, they've got to be the best. If you look at all the competition, they've got to be better than everybody else. But that's the wrong way to look at it. And the father of competitive strategy is a guy named Michael Porter. And I love the way he's defined it. And I'm going to look up, I've got it right on my corkboard over my desk. He says competitive strategy is deliberately choosing a different set of activities to deliver a unique mix of value. If you try to be better than your competition on all dimensions, it's a race to the bottom. You're not going to do that. They're trying to do the same thing. You're in what they call the red ocean with the blood, all over the place. You're just not getting where the idea is to be unique. The idea is to say, what's the problem my core customer has, which by the way means you better understand who your core customer is, right? Who's that avatar? What's the biggest problem my core customer has that I solve better than anybody else, or our company solves better than anybody else? And that's the heart of what differentiates you. Now, I take that much deeper with my clients, where we look at that. We look at who they are versus the competition in the eyes of the marketplace. Who are they versus the competition? And we actually score it and figure out, where is that white space? Not what's one thing. What are the 3, 4, 5 things that if we group them together, as Porter says, a set of activities that deliver unique value. What's the set of activities that differentiate you? And then we look at it. And what I do with my clients is I have them put numbers on it. How do you measure that you actually get there? And let's come up with a plan quarter by quarter as to how you're going to get there, so that 2 or 3 years from now or 18 months from now, you own that market. You've got a differentiated strategy. Some companies I go into already have a differentiated strategy. And then our goal is, how do you protect it and how do you build on it? But most don't. Most are just trying to be better than their competition on all the same dimensions everybody else is playing on.
Getcha. Love it. Love that answer. Thanks very much, Mike. So let's go to the quick fire round. I'm just going to ask you some questions real fast, and you can just give your thoughts. Favorite movie?
Swingers, with Vince Vaughn and Jon Favreau. It's a different. I love it because
it's a classic.
The conversations are so, they just didn't write it. They ad-libbed most of it. So
Mike, you're so money you don't even know it.
That's how I know you saw that movie.
That's right. Author. Favorite author?
So many. We talked about Lencioni early, and it's not Lenconi, it's Lencioni. Love Lencioni. Malcolm Gladwell, love his stuff, because I always think I know where he's going and he goes somewhere different, but read a ton, but those are the first 2 that come to mind.
Great. Favorite book?
I love The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier. Really, really powerful book about coaching versus giving advice. And they are 2 very, very different things.
Love it. Favorite artist?
Don't ask me that. I'm gonna make a fool of myself. I don't know art. Pass. Next question. Can I get a lifeline or call a friend?
Most people just throw out Picasso or
no. Here, I'm going to sound smart. You ready?
Yeah.
I'm going to say Van Gogh.
Oh wow, very good.
Because it's not pronounced Van Gogh, it's Van Gogh.
Van Gogh. There you go. I'm totally impressed, and I just think you're the greatest now. Musician. Favorite musician?
I'm a big Who fan.
Who?
The Who?
Okay, I was this straight. Yeah,
good one.
All joke. That's an all joke. Favorite philosopher?
Well, I spend about 10 hours a day reading all of the famous philosophers. But I like this Stoic philosophy. I read. My God, what's the name of the book? The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Okay. Who talks about Marcus Aurelius and. Now, don't ask me if there are any other philosophies, because I'm not sure I can name them, but I like that one.
I was just going to say, bro, just future reference, next time you're asked that question on a podcast, instead of saying The Obstacle is the Way, which is a great book, Ryan Holiday, and, Stillness is the Key, and there's a bunch of others, but a lot of that is based upon the Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, as you mentioned, yes, who wrote the classic book Meditations. So what I recommend you do is, next time you're asked, it'll make you sound a lot cooler. Just say, "Oh, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's a classic." I mean, here is one of the most powerful men in the world at the time, and he's just so much wisdom and really.
Could you stop? I'm writing that down. Could you talk a little slower?
I'll email you later and let you know what the answer. Favorite TV series?
I I'm gonna go with newer. I like it's old Breaking Bad, Sopranos, but newer ones. I love Ted Lasso
Yeah.
and Severance.
Severance. Okay.
Really good. That's a new one. Only one season so far.
All right.
Really, really good.
I'll check it out. Desired superpower. If you could have any superpower, what would it
You'll
be?
love this one. Height. And I'm going to leave it at that.
I was going to say it, and I didn't, just to be nice, but you said it, so that's cool.
Whenever I know someone's going to like insult me in a funny way, I like to beat them to the punch.
Well, you definitely beat me to the punch. If you could reach me, that would be. So decide. So ideal time travel. If you could travel anywhere, past, present, and future, when?
You know, I would never think about going back like 100 years ago, 200 years, 300. I would never want to do that because that their life was so hard back then. And I don't think I want to go to the future. At time, I think I would travel back to February, right before the pandemic, and maybe like buy a bunch of Amazon stock or PPE stock or something. That's about as far back. But then I'd have to live through the pandemic again. You know what? I'm not going anywhere.
All right, you're staying
Treat that
right.
like the artist question. I'm not doing it.
If you were to live anywhere else besides where you live, where would it be?
Probably Tuscany, Italy. Love
Beautiful.
Italy.
Beautiful. If you were to do anything other than what you do, what would you do?
These days, nothing. But years ago, I was going to be shortstop for the Yankees, but Derek Jeter beat me out for that. So,
Well, screw it.
I only had one problem: is I had no talent. But if I had talent, I think I
Yeah.
could have done it.
Listen, I believe in you. I definitely believe in you
Thank you.
and your lack of talent. One piece of advice, if you were to summarize one piece of advice for the world, mate, well, what would it be?
Yeah, I would go back to us talking about focus before, and I'd say you certainly can't always change the situation you're in, but you can 100% always change how you focus on it. And if you change your focus, you're going to change your life.
Fantastic. Check out Meditations on a serious note because it's very much in line with that idea, as is Stoicism in general. But Meditations is it's a wonderful book, so definitely check it out, and it'll make you sound smarter as well.
And and now your audience knows I need that big time.
Listen, thank you so much, mate. Always a pleasure chatting. Looking forward to talking to you. I think it's next week or the following one or whatever. But it's been great having you on the podcast. Thanks very much, and take. By the way, if anyone wants to know about you, where can they find out?
They can go to mike-goldman.com.
Okay, and we'll stick that in the show.
Or follow me on Instagram at Mike Goldman Coach.
Perfect. We'll stick those links in the show notes as well. But for now, thanks very much, mate. Take care, and talk to you soon.
Thank you.